October
We're going live.
2020, and I am officially calling this meeting to order. We have a quorum already. In fact, all the members are present. Just a reminder to the people watching in the audience that we have a new mask mandate, and so things could be a little bit slow in transitioning between speakers at this time. Those of us sitting at home in our own homes can not wear a mask, but staff is wearing a mask. And so we're going to try to allow them to remove the mask and be the only person in the room so that we can better understand them and see them. So with that said, we are going to move along to our first order of business, and that is the approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any questions regarding the minutes and comments or a motion?
This is Craig. I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept and approve the minutes from July 22nd, 23rd, 2020, August 27th, 2020. Are there any additional comments? If not, we will take a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. And since Craig made the motion, I'm assuming his is aye.
Yeah, I said aye.
Okay, so we will move on then to a request for public comment. However, since we are doing this virtually, we have accepted all of our public comment written and also through some testimony. Prior to this meeting time, board members were supplied with the last of that earlier this morning. Hopefully everyone had a chance to go through that additional 30 pages of public comment. So, and with that, we will move on to item number A, which is the director's agency report. So Director Warren, you are up.
Yes, morning everybody. Just a few things I wanted to highlight. First off, we did just receive our budget report from our administrative partners that are building the governor's budget. And so we're on track with that. It looks like we're going to be in good shape. The governor's budget comes out in December, and that's when we'll be able to publicly talk about what's in or out of our budget. And so I just want to let you know the budget process is still just cooking along, and we're doing okay in it. Fires, I'm sure that's been on everybody's mind. We have had staff now out in every one of the major areas. It's been primarily Eddie and Brian, although Eddie and myself made one of the trips. So we've been down in Douglas County, we've been Clackamas, we've been in the Sandy Ann Canyon and the McKenzie. You know, it's hard to put into words what it actually looks like when you go see it and the damage and all the things being done out there. I really want to acknowledge the Douglas County Sheriff was one of the first ones to reach out and ask us to come down to their area and really see what the challenges and problems were going to be. And they took a whole day out of their time to give Eddie and I a tour. And I know the Clackamas County and the others involved in the McKenzie and the Sandy Ann did as well. So just really want to acknowledge our law enforcement partners and all the work that they've been doing and helping get us up to speed. And then I wanted to give an update. I think it was 2 meetings ago, the board, oh, hold on, I'm going to let Colleen in. Oh, somebody else did. Sorry, there's one of those technical challenges. So Jennifer usually takes care of things quicker than I can actually take care of them. So I'm assuming she must have let you in, Colleen. So a couple meetings ago, we had finalized that the board wanted some way to acknowledge people when they did good work. And we'd come up with a board member coin. And you won't be able to see it because, you know, but we have it done. It's a nice looking coin. We'll get a few to each of you and you can hand them out to whomever you please if you think they've done something good for recreational boating. And this morning, Craig had asked actually to acknowledge several staff. So I think we've got everybody on that Craig wanted to acknowledge. So I'm going to turn it over to Craig. And Craig, just so you know, with the new rules, we can't have them in here so I can hand them the coin, but I'll make sure they get their coin afterwards. So.
All right, well, thanks, Larry. You appreciate the opportunity to acknowledge a few people. I've been on the board for 2 years, and I've been very impressed with the results that we see from the staff. So I certainly want to take the opportunity to acknowledge what the staff does. Let me start with Eddie. Eddie, I've never pronounced your last name, and I don't want to mess it up, so I'll call you Eddie. I've gone to several law enforcement academies that Eddie has organized, and I've been very impressed with the content. And most of all, I've been impressed with Eddie and his relationship with the law enforcement community. When we say we have a partnership with law enforcement, that's Eddie. His ability to communicate and to provide us the link to the law enforcement community is very impressive. The course material is extensive and it really bodes well for what we see in the law enforcement community when they're out there trying to implement our rules or trying to interact with the public and make it a good, safe voting experience for everybody. Recently, Eddie coordinated a day on the river for me with law enforcement on the Willamette, and that was quite a learning experience. I didn't appreciate how much time and effort the law enforcement folks put into trying to educate voters on the river and trying to make it a good voting experience for everyone. So I really appreciate you doing that, Eddie, and I encourage other board members to try to spend the day on the river with law enforcement. So it's really an honor for me to give you a coin. So thanks for everything you do, Eddie.
I'm board member with you. It's my honor. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
The next one I'd like to try to acknowledge is Dorothy Deal. We haven't had a lot of contact with Dorothy, but every time that she's involved with a program or an issue, she really comes to the top. Recently, she's worked on the disability voting opportunities, and she's done a super job in trying to coordinate that and deal with a new issue for the board to put in place. Additionally, her work on the abandoned and derelict vehicle program has been exceptional. That is a very difficult program to handle and address. Nobody wants to take responsibility for these vessels, yet they're a voting hazard and sometimes a safety hazard. So I really appreciate the work and effort she's put into it. And again, her attitude is top. So I really appreciate what you're doing, Dorothy, and I want to say thanks for a great job.
Member Withy, thank you very much. This is very meaningful to me. I appreciate it.
I wish I was there to give you the coin, but we'll get that to you. Next, I would like to acknowledge Josh Mulholland. The work he's done on Willamette, both the Newburgh Pool and Laurel Dam, that's a thankless job. He's really a grievance coordinator and making sure that he tries to appease everybody and make sure that their concerns and issues are addressed. But when you have divergent views, it's very hard to make sure everybody comes out happy and satisfied. So it's a thankless job, and I'm really thankful that he's there to put in the effort that we need to bring the issues to the board so that we can address them and try to make it a great, safe voting experience for everyone. And I know his work's going to continue, and we're going to talk about his work today. So really appreciate what you do, Josh. And I think it's just super, the efforts that you put in. So thanks.
Thank you, Member Whitney. Thank you for the way that you kind of characterize those challenges, and thank you for the recognition. It's appreciated.
You bet. And last, I would like to thank Jennifer Cooper. We gave her a really difficult task of putting together an orientation guide that will help us very much in the future, help us, even though that we're old members on the board, to figure out how we interact with each other and how we carry out our job in promoting voting recreation for the public. It's a very, very thick manual and very comprehensive. So I know it took a lot of effort and time for her to put that together. And as a board member, I really appreciate that she did it. Further, I really I'm very thankful. She's very organized and structured. Keeps me on schedule and provides me all the information I need to try to do a good job as a board member. This morning I was scrambling because my link on my iPad wouldn't connect to Teams meeting, but we got it worked out and here I am. So thanks for everything you do, Jennifer. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Board Member Whitty.
And yes, thank you. And I would acknowledge that we do have excellent staff here at the Marine Board. And a further testament to Jennifer, last night I had tried to set up my own meeting and I somehow set it up for 9:30 Thursday night. And by the time Randy had complained about that time, Jennifer had already understood I meant 10 o'clock Friday morning and changed it. So how she deduced that from my mistake, I'll never know. But she is great to work with, and Eddie and Dorothy and Josh all do good work. So we'll make sure they get their coins. And board members, if Jennifer hasn't already, I think she's going to make sure you get a few coins. But likewise, just like we did for Member Withy, if there's folks here that you want to acknowledge, since we can't be together, just you'll let us know and we'll find a way to make sure it happens. But you're free to give those to staff, non-staff, whomever you like. And
So I'd just like to second all of those accolades that Member Withy has just given out and say that, you know, all of those are very much appreciated. And we recognize, as he has so eloquently done, their work and contribution to us as board members.
excellent. Thank you. And just one final update from our side. Josh had, I believe the board wanted a Duckworth Doc update. Josh and I talked about that and we didn't get it in the director's report. So Josh was ready this morning just to give a real quick update on the Duckworth Doc. You all took action spring and good things have been happening ever since. So Josh, you want to give that update real quick?
Sure, absolutely. Chair and members of the board, regarding the Duckworth Dock, by all accounts, the transition of uses at that dock for 2020 has been pretty smooth and successful. Promotion of the mixed use opportunities by the city and other folks responsible for pushing that effort has been predictably muted due to the COVID situation. This is not a year for promoting, large get-togethers. But staff has received many positive reports of increased use at the dock. And furthermore, I, for one, have not received any negative feedback at all from motorized boaters. On the contrary, I've heard that the increased presence of recreators of all types has actually made the dock a more pleasant place to be for motorized boaters and non-motorized boaters alike. And Member Jackson, you may have heard more on that. So if you have, feel free to add to what I said.
Yeah, it did do some promotions. They were doing some Wednesday night things where they'd bring a musician in and invite people, again, masks, social distancing. I wasn't able to actually participate in it. I buy one. There was a fair number of people in the water. I know they had some water polo games down in the area created between the Duckworth space and the Esplanade space. And again, I have not heard anything negative about what was going on down there. I did hear, however, that a large wake damaged part of the structure that allows the ramp to connect. That was brought to my attention by somebody from City Parks and also by Willie.
So actually, Member Jackson, on that topic, soon after that occurred, Parks reached out to me, regarding asking for a potential slow-no wake zone. We brought it to their attention that because of the nature of that dock, it already was granted a 200-foot slow-no wake buffer as a tie-up, for 6 or more watercraft. So from what I understand at this point, the city is looking into options to put signage and or to place buoys outside of that so that that is better marked.
Okay, great. Is that anything else on the director's report?
Yeah, I had a question. We talked about budget and planning here, and we talked about having right now a surplus of funds. So my question is, what happens to unspent funds at the close of the biennium?
Member Withy, So as another funded agency, when we have excess money at the end of the biennium, it becomes our beginning balance at the next biennium. And we would expect with a fee increase this biennium that we would see, usually in state government, you build for a couple years, you maintain a couple years, and you spend down your reserves for a couple years. When the budget was really, really bad, when the economic forecast was really bad, we did have some concerns statewide, not just the Marine Board, about different measures that might have been taken to take ending balances from smaller agencies like ours. With the new forecast and the plethora of challenges with doing that, that's not high on my concern list anymore. And so we would expect it to drop to the end and become our beginning balance next time.
So funds do not expire, then they just carry over to the next year.
Remember, with you, the funds don't expire, but the permission to spend does. So your cash stays in the bank, but you have to ask permission. That's the easiest way I always think to describe it. You have to ask permission to get to spend it.
Thanks, Larry, I appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments regarding the director's agency report? I'd just like to reach out and say thank you to Eddie and Brian and Larry for going and seeing the fire damage in those areas. It'll be interesting to get some opinions and visuals on that. Kind of as an aside, my father lost his home in that fire on the San Diego River, and he lives right on the river. So I'm not the only one in the state who's had relatives or friends who've lost their homes, but it did hit pretty close to home. So thanks for going and seeing those areas, and to those agencies that helped to host you guys and show you some of those damages.
So, Chair Early, I'd like to ask another question in that regard. Larry, is there any plans to work with other agencies in trying to prevent runoff from the burned areas into our rivers and waters, such as silt barriers or debris barriers of some type?
Remember, as of now, we were joking yesterday, there seems to be more task force than anything right now. But so I would say, yeah, everybody's trying to work together. The sheer amount of task force is getting a little confusing to figure out which one is doing what. But I feel comfortable now saying each of the primary watersheds have a group now that's focusing on that watershed that includes a mixture of federal partners and state partners and is looking at all of those type of things. And then outside of those watershed work groups, there's also other task forces that are specifically looking at some of the environmental concerns. So we're well represented, and Janine is on those task forces looking at that piece. And then that bleeds over into some of the safety work and things that Randy's group does. So the federal partners are often the leads on those watershed groups, which is good. But we are at the table with multiple organizations on those. So.
Thanks, Larry. And then I would like to acknowledge law enforcement again, what they did especially around Detroit Lake, in trying to help and assist people in evacuation, I think is just tremendous. I don't know how I can extend my thank you enough to them, so they are fully acknowledged. But I'd like to, whatever way we can, pass on our appreciation.
And I would second that too. It's incredible the effort that law enforcement went to help everybody else when they themselves were many times in the quote unquote hot seat as well. And I think some of those guys lost their homes as well. And Member Winky, I'd just like to tell you too that, knowing what my dad is going through as a landowner on the watershed, there are a lot of steps to go through in order for those people to be able to get back onto their properties. And so there are multiple agencies being considered and working together. So not only individually, but as the task forces too. So I don't think that we're going to see any lack of effort in helping to protect the watersheds. And I'd like to say thank you to the Marine Board too for getting out the information regarding some of those areas on the water that have downed trees or trees that are potential hazards for later this winter when the water starts to come up. I've seen several social media posts and those have been really helpful. So thank you. If there's nothing else regarding the director's report, we will move on to item B, which is going to continue this conversation with the grant budget authority. So we are going to take just a second to change people in the audio visual room. And we'll wait for Larry to sanitize and move out so Janine Select can come in and give us an update on the grant budget authority for the board. Larry is quickly exiting. And here is Janine.
Good morning, Chair Early and members of the board. Item B is a request to give some additional flexibility for us to be able to respond to situations with the fires. We do have 2 confirmations of facilities that were significantly damaged. Facility owners are still getting into areas, and because the next board meeting is in January, I approached Larry about getting a special authority to allow him to award grants if needed to be responsive to getting facilities open or repaired. FEMA funding often takes a while to go through the approval process. Historically, when we've had FEMA triggered events, we've worked with the landowner to get things up and operational. And if they get the federal funds, they either reimburse us grant money. So it's kind of the reduction of expense aspect of it. So staff is recommending that the board give a limited authority to Larry to approve grants until the January board meeting.
And are you recommending any sort of a ceiling on that grant authority? Because I didn't see anything there. It just said above the threshold of $10,000.
Yeah, I did not put a cap on it because, to be quite frank, we're still having a hard time getting into facilities. We know that Cain's Marina on Detroit essentially lost the pump out. It exploded. Part of the gangways melted. The dock that it was on is gone. So we're working with them and their insurance and FEMA trying to figure out if there is a nexus for us to get that up and operational, as well as Detroit Lake Marina had damage. We're just not sure yet. As you can imagine, working with all the various state and federal components and also private insurance, it's challenging. And although 3 months may not seem like much, it may be very important to get access open into some of these areas where we have safe entry and exits. Because through the early COVID, when facilities were closed, sometimes it created an unintended consequence by not having a takeout in a safe location or not having to put in if people created their own. So this is really just kind of a Band-Aid in the event we need something for us to be able to respond as quickly as possible.
And then I had an additional question regarding agreements for these facilities because many of them are under contractual agreements. So how will this impact it and will it extend it, or will we just consider this, basically an act of God that would be covered under some other?
Right. So fortunately, the Forest Glen and the Fish Creek do not have any active grants. So we don't have any issues there. We do have active grants with both Cain's Marina and Detroit Lake Marina. Those involve federal funds. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service views this as a force majeure clause. It was an unforeseen, unintended item. And so they do not penalize the grant recipient. They will actually work with us that if there is needed funding to replace those items, that they will provide federal funds to help get them back in service.
Great. Any other questions from the board?
So today you're looking for approval for this authority?
Yes. And like I said, it would be just to the January meeting, and if any grants were approved, it would definitely be reported at the January meeting.
Okay, so the probably going to be needs for this authority beyond January, right?
Well, I'm hoping with the way the board meets with the January and the April, that will allow us to get into a board approval process. It's just around the holidays, it's very hard to convene a conference call or any kind of a special request if this is needed.
Well, I make a motion that the board provide this authority to the director. I don't know if we want to put a cap on it or not, but I feel the director should have that authority. We need to be responsive to the needs of these locations and facilities.
I would second that motion.
Okay, and then did you have a comment to make, Vince, because I saw your hand was up?
No, just that I just wanted to second that motion.
Okay, and Colleen, you have your hand up?
Oh, sorry, I was also going to second.
Okay. Okay, Laura does have her hand up now.
I do have my hand up, and it's not to second it. I think this is a great thing going forward. What I would request is that instead of waiting till January for a report back, if any of these grants are given out, that the board get just a quick email describing who, what, how much, why, at the time that that grant is awarded.
We will definitely do that.
Yes, and I would agree with that. Thank you, Laura. Any other additional comments?
Well, did we decide to whether to put a cap on it or not, or just leave it open?
The motion was not to put a cap on it.
Okay, I agree with that, since it was my motion.
Yes.
And I agree with that since it was my second. So there we go.
Okay, so, given that there are no additional comments or, additions to the motion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And good luck to all of those needing those grants. It's a trying time. We don't need to add to it. Okay, and so now we have the 2021 to 23 voting facility grant timeline, item C, which Janine Black, it is still your turn.
Thank you, Chair Early, members of the board. This is actually the first time we are doing this. We've had a lot of discussion with applicants, and as you know, with the Waterway Access Program, we have a lot of new applicants that we're working with. And so we wanted to publish the biennium timeline for grants so that they can prepare and they have time to go through their processes and meet with their constituents. So I want the board to have the opportunity to approve this because we've added some additional layers on this review process. You know, as I mentioned, it's about a 6-month process incorporating in the public comment process, the expanded staff review and recommendation. So, you know, this gets kind of important because if the board changes these board meeting dates, it has that ripple impact on the schedule. And so I wanted the board to be able to view this, see what the times are for it, and so we can get it out on our website, get it publicized so that applicants know ahead of time and can plan accordingly. Are there any questions?
No, I think it's great that this is in here, since, you know, as long as I've been part of the board, we've never done this. We've never looked at the timeline or published this so that grant applicants could be more proactive in their approach and their applications for grants. So appreciate you putting this all together, Janine, and would be in favor of doing this. Craig?
Yeah, Janine, does this include the waterway access grant money?
Yes. Yes, it does.
It's essentially all project funds then, right?
Correct. Yes.
Thanks.
Any other comments or motions to approve the 21-23 voting facility grant timeline document?
All right, well, I'll make a motion to approve the grant timeline and documents as provided by the staff.
I'll second that.
Okay, are there any additional questions or comments for Janine? Vince,
Yes.
did you have a question or a comment?
Is my hand showing that it's raised?
You're blinking is what you're doing.
Oh,
It's kind of a new thing that I'm seeing on Teams right now. You're blinking.
I shouldn't be blinking, I'm just staring. So, I don't, yeah, again, I wasn't raising my hand, so I'm looking to vote.
All right, so if there are no additional comments, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. We are going to wait for you to sanitize. And next up will be item D. And Dorothy Deal will be coming in and talking with us about the Abandoned and Derelict Vessel Program update. She provided us with a nice PowerPoint presentation prior to the meeting. It was part of our board book, so I am assuming that everyone had a chance to look at that complete document. That it was an incredible document. So she should be arriving, and there she is.
Good morning to our early members of the board. All right, I will take just a moment to pull up that presentation that was included in the board book. And so that is what you will see as we go along. So I'm going to share that. Oops.
Is it up there?
It's still working on it. It's just about there.
Here we go.
Okay, so Chair Early, everybody can see the presentation now?
Not exactly.
Yeah, it's fine on my computer.
I can see it.
It's good on mine.
Okay, and Chair Early, you can,
No,
I'm not
I
able to see it, but I'll just pull it up in the board book.
me too. I've got it.
okay. If any staff want to jump in and help me troubleshoot, I welcome it, but otherwise, if you're all comfortable with that, then we'll just move right ahead. So,
Yes. Please go
Okay.
ahead.
sure, so part of my role here at the agency is coordinating this Abandoned and Derelict Vessel Program, or ADV program, as we shorten it to. That involves a lot of different layers and roles, but it includes receiving a lot of reports of abandoned and derelict boats or suspected abandoned and derelict boats, coordinating with other agencies and sometimes contractors on a strategy for response, prioritizing the spending from the salvage vessel subaccount to address this problem, and participating in discussions and collaborative efforts to try to manage this problem on a statewide and even region-wide basis. So with a year under my belt here at the agency, I'm trying to work on this and some recent new developments. We just felt like this was an appropriate time to provide the board kind of an update and an overview of the program and ADVs in general. So a greater number of agencies recently have been joining these conversations, and there's been some renewed media interest in the topic, which you all may be aware of if you watched the 6 o'clock K2 News last night. There was a story that aired about some abandoned and derelict vessels in Portland, which our agency has been involved in and which we've been partnering with other agencies to try to address. So I don't know when the last time was the board was really briefed on this topic. So some of this may be review, so I apologize. And I'll try to just keep the pace pretty quick until we get to a spot where somebody, has a question or a concern, and then we'll delve more into it. Because this is kind of, I see it more as a conversation starter. It's a big conversation. It's complex, and so we're just kind of scraping the surface on some of it. I wanted to start out with the actual legal definition of an abandoned boat because it's a common word. dictionary definition doesn't necessarily capture how we have to interact with this word as far as the statutes go. So the actual language is up there. It kind of boils down to a boat that's left somewhere without authorization. That confuses folks sometimes because when we're talking about the waters of our state, most often the land manager for those submerged lands is the Department of State Lands. And in the interest of protecting the public's right to, boat transiently, which we want to protect, they do not declare that a boat is unauthorized until it has been there for at least 30 days. And so that frustrates some people sometimes. So we get a lot of reports of abandoned boats, which do not actually meet the legal definition because, maybe they've been there a week and common sense tells the person that it's an abandoned boat. But the purpose of these statutes is really to protect people's rights, and not everyone sees it that way all the time, but ultimately that is the intent. So this slide describes a legally derelict boat. And again, common usage doesn't necessarily capture what we mean when we say derelict. It has to meet several kind of specific points, and it can take a little bit of experience and knowledge and being around boats for someone to articulate just exactly how a boat meets the definition of derelict. So a really big part of my job is communicating and responding to other agencies when they have questions about how they can handle an abandoned or derelict boat. And, walking them through the process that's laid out in statute if they want to propose seizure of a vessel, and then, helping them just figure out all the steps they have to take because, if they're lucky, their agency hasn't dealt with a lot of abandoned boats, so they're kind of new to it. Sometimes it can be, working with them to come up with creative ways to avoid having to seize a boat and solve it in a way that, maybe takes a little bit longer or wasn't what we originally thought might work, but, if it, turns out better for everyone in the end, then I'm super happy to help people in that way. In order to ensure that I'm providing consistent and accurate and timely information to these other agencies, which a lot of them are, what you think of as law enforcement agencies, sheriff's offices, police departments. But it could be ODOT, it could be the Department of Fish and Wildlife, it could be any public agency that is, impacted by an abandoned boat. So I created this manual, which is included in its entirety in your materials. I just thought it might be helpful for you to see, what some of these agencies are having to do when they do respond to an abandoned vessel. So that leads to the next slide, which gives you a little more detail maybe about what our agency's role in this is. The foundation of the program and the original intent of the salvage vessel subaccount was to be a reimbursement fund for probably mostly law enforcement agencies who started encountering these abandoned boats, and they're costly to deal with. And so they would basically handle it on their own and request reimbursement from us. That has evolved over the years to the point where now our agency is named as an enforcement agency in the statute. So we can seize boats, we can dispose of boats, and we can use the funds from that salvage vessel subaccount to directly respond to vessels when we choose to. And so we have done that in the form of an emergency response to a vessel where multiple agencies are trying to respond and it's about to sink, and we know how to get a contractor out there and take care of it, so we've definitely done that. We also do that in the form of collaborative planned cleanups, mostly with our partners at the Department of State Lands, with support and input from other agencies as well. But we've done some cost shares where, we know about an area where it's a big problem, maybe there are several abandoned and derelict vessels in one area. And so we coordinate with them to go in and get all of those at one time, often with, some support from them in terms of also doing some cleanup garbage and structures and that sort of thing because we cannot use our funding for anything but boats. And
Dorothy, if you wait just a second, Member Whitney has a question.
Yeah, on the process, how do you ascertain the risk associated with an abandoned derelict boat? You know, you don't know who's on it or what's on it. So is there some way that you appraise what risk you might be taking by entering that boat or addressing the issue? Like, are you bringing in Homeland Security or other agencies to do that assessment before you undertake disposing of the vessel?
Member Withy, I haven't encountered a vessel that we were going to deal with that was large enough that a sheriff's deputy or sergeant, in the field couldn't ascertain that on their own. I would absolutely defer to them. I mean, recently I spent some time on the water with Sergeant Dangler of the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. And when those folks spend, every single day out on the water, often they're interacting with people who may be occupying these boats. And so they may have, a history with the occupant that goes back many years. They may even have, kind of an anecdotal history of the boat. They might be able to say, well, I know this boat was moored at such and such marina, for the past 5 years, and now here it is. And so, I trust them and defer to them as far as determining, safety risk, whether there's, going to be any kind of, personal hazard as far as interacting with the boat. As far as hazardous materials and petroleum pollution, we rely quite a bit on the Department of Environmental Quality and the U.S. Coast Guard to help us with some of those type of questions.
Thanks, sir.
So just going down this list real quick, my colleague Glenn Dolphin also does a considerable amount of outreach with the clean marina facilities that he interacts with. And that's going to be escalating quite a bit as part of our Noaa grant program, which I'll get to in a little bit. But the Clean Marina program is kind of our only avenue into that community because our agency doesn't regulate marinas or really any of their activities if it's not, directly boat related. And so that's kind of our door into, getting to interact with that community and help them, figure out ways to try to prevent the ADV problem from continuing to impact their business and how they can help prevent contributing to the problem at large. There's also a couple important task forces or work groups that we participate in, and those have been growing and becoming more valuable over time. And then we have the Noaa Clean Marina Facility kind of a vessel turn-in program, which you've heard a little bit about. I'll tell you a little bit more about what's going on with that here in a moment. It's kind of hard to stay on a linear path when you're talking about ADVs because the problem is so complex and there's so many, different players and stakeholders. So I apologize if it feels like I'm sort of jumping around a little bit, but stop me anytime. So this slide is to give you a sense of the cost of ADVs, and it's easy to focus on those numbers. I put the dollar amount that we actually paid out of the salvage vessel subaccount for the cost associated with raising that vessel, towing it, storing it, disposing of it. But that doesn't get to the more complex issues that I kind of described in the text there, because there are sort of these vague costs that include, the enjoyment of other boaters to be able to use that waterway and not have this experience of encountering abandoned and derelict boats. There's the navigational and safety concern of, you can see one of those sailboats, that's right out practically in a commercial channel. And so to try to, capture the whole cost is hard. There's a lot of complex issues like homelessness, trespassing, mental health problems, addiction, crime, and perception of crime and perception of a lack of safety. So this slide, it's already somewhat out of date, and I knew that would be true when I submitted it a few weeks ago because I knew we had some projects in the works and some pending reimbursements. But this slide shows you the dollar amount that has actually been paid already out of the salvage vessel sub-account for this biennium. So I put a little asterisk in there because I knew it would be true that additional removals or reimbursements to other agencies are pending in Multnomah and Yamhill and Lincoln and now Columbia counties. And so now we're at a point where when those bills are now paid, we're at that very upper limit of what we can spend to directly address the problem with the salvage vessel sub-account. So we will not be able to take on any more projects or, I'm sorry, Chair Early, I don't know if you were out for a bit. I believe I have let you back into the meeting.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, I don't know if you missed anything or not, or if you have any questions.
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
I lost internet for a minute.
Okay, shoot. So I
see two Bell Earlys on my screen. Which one is the real one?
So I was just saying that, we're now at that upper limit of that $150,000 that we're authorized in statute to put into the salvage vessel sub-account. It's very specific on what we can use that money for. And it has to be directly related to the salvage, towing, storage, dismantling, disposal of a boat. No admin or overhead costs or, anything like that. So I hope that sort of gives you a sense of, how that money has been used and the number of boats that have officially been, destroyed and the bills have been paid. But like I said, we still have some of those pending, and that includes the big multi-vessel removal project that's currently underway in the North Portland Harbor. And that's the project that was referenced in that KT News story last night.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions so far? Okay.
I'm having trouble advancing to the next slide, so I
That's
apologize.
okay. I've had all kinds of issues.
Okay, I think I've done it now. So to the Noaa Marina Refunding Partnership, which I've alluded to a couple times, this is something that we've been mentally preparing for since, last year, and my colleagues Glenn Dolphin and Josh Mulholland were already working on it before I even got started here. So just to remind you, a couple of objectives with that program. Now that we know that, we're winners. We've obtained this funding and this partnership with Noaa, and it's very much more of a partnership than a traditional, like, here's your money, go do your project. They're going to be working with us and supporting us quite a bit. So we're really excited and encouraged by that. We want to remove at-risk vessels from marinas before they become ADVs out in the wild. As I say, they're currently tied up and floating, but they're, they might be already owned by the marina because for whatever reason, the owner stopped coming to the boat, stopped maintaining it, didn't use it anymore, stopped paying mortgage fees. And so if you were to talk to, any number of marina managers, chances are they would tell you that they have at least a couple, if not a large number of these abandoned vessels in their facility. And that presents a significant cost and an opportunity loss for them. And it also puts, the greater boating environment at risk when some of these boats end up leaving the marina and going out in the water versus being pulled out and disposed of, which is probably, what ought to happen. The other objective is to encourage marina management practices that may prevent future ADVs. So in order to be eligible to have their abandoned vessels removed by this funding program, they have to already be participants in the Voluntary Clean Marina program. And they have to agree that they will implement a suite of best management practices that Glenn has come up with a pretty good list and descriptions of why those should work. It's things like seaworthiness tests, enhanced insurance packages, doing a better job of enforcing the state registration requirements to make sure that people are actually keeping up with the registration on their boat. And so those marina managers will have to agree that they will implement those and continue those on a long-term basis. And one thing that encourages us a lot about this program is that Noaa invited us to apply for a second year of funding already. And so we haven't even fully launched the program, and they're already excited enough that they see it as a 2-year program. And so we're hopeful it will be at least 2 years, if not, an ongoing program that grows. So I don't know if you have any questions about that, but oops, still having trouble with these slides. So this is something that you've seen before. We don't know just exactly how many vessels or from which marinas we might get these proposals. They're sort of applications to our program. But we have this data that you can see on the screen from what we gathered from marinas when we were applying for the funding initially. And so these photos just kind of remind you of what we're looking at here. A lot of the vessels over in the coastal marinas are very large. Says average length of 33, but we've got some that are up there, 50, 60, 65. And then this extends up into the Columbia River as well. Okay, so I'm hoping that what I've offered you so far kind of highlights some of the really good efforts that we're putting into this. We have collaborations with other agencies that are working really hard on this issue. And we've made a lot of progress in a lot of areas. I would say that those relationships are something I'm proud of. As I said, we have many more stakeholders joining the conversations. I've recently, talked with folks from Business Oregon, which is something that we, you don't always think about who, might be part of the conversation. So those connections that we're making are excellent. You've seen some of the on-the-ground work that we've done actually removing abandoned and derelict vessels, but as I'm sure you know, we can't remove every single one. We're excited that the Noaa program is aiming at prevention. It's probably the most robust targeted prevention effort that we've undertaken. So we're very excited about being able to look at it from that perspective rather than just, go out and grab as many boats as we can and just let it keep proliferating. So it's a lot of really good work being done there. I'm glad that we have more people being involved because it's absolutely not just a Marine Board issue. It's a complex issue with a lot of different causes and consequences. But what I wanted to do here is to give you a sense of the challenges that we face, maybe some areas where I would love some feedback on directions that we could go, improvements that can be made. And just to give you a sense of the experience of our customers and the folks who are calling me, because I do receive a lot of calls about abandoned boats, whether it's from other agencies or citizens or, especially boaters. So I will go through these pretty quickly and obviously happy to delve into it a little bit more if you like. So our first one here, this is the Marina Manager. And this is not uncommon that, through really no fault of the marina, they have ended up with a boat that was not in their care prior to it drifting into their space. Sometimes it sinks or it lodges up against a dock. It's obviously creating a problem for them. And they call the Marine Board to see what resources there are, what, technical advice we can offer. So my response in this case is that when they have a lease from the Department of State Lands, that that paperwork's going to stipulate in there that that's the responsibility of the marina regardless of how it got there. And so the Marine Board typically does not intervene in these situations, and it's going to be up to that marina's insurance, and for them to figure out how to pay for that. We try to be a resource with information, help brainstorm, help connect them with contractors, but that's the extent of our involvement on these. And Chair Early, I believe Member Withy has his hand up.
Yes, he does. Sorry.
So my question is in regards to what is private and what is public. These boats are sitting on Oregon waters, which are obviously public and to some degree our responsibility. But whenever they're tied to a private dock or anchored in private property, they're no longer our responsibility?
Member Withy, I think that does kind of characterize the problem that I'm presenting here, is that the Department of State Lands is the land manager for state lands, and that includes the submerged land under our state waters. And when they offer a piece of that submerged land for lease to a private entity, that private entity is accepting some risk there when they sign up for that. And so, whether they remember, in the moment or not, at some point that private entity did understand that would be their responsibility. And so that's, we defer to the Department of State Lands as far as their policy on that.
I was on the land with law enforcement, and I saw all the apparently abandoned derelict boats off Ross Island. And I was told that we can't really do anything about it because that is Ross Island Gravel's responsibility. There appears to be, much more than just an eyesore. It's a navigational issue and a spill issue. But apparently, are you saying that we can't really address that because it's anchored on Ross Island land?
Remember, with the Ross Island situation is all types of complicated, but from the Marine Board agency standpoint, the statute would not prohibit us from seizing a derelict vessel on Ross Island sand and gravel property. One barrier is that there are a lot of vessels there and limited funding. And so there's a prioritization that also goes on there. If we, I don't know how to describe it, because the private property issue there is that Ross Island is this odd situation where they actually do own some submerged land. And that's fairly rare in Oregon, but it happens more in the Portland area. And I won't go into all of the history behind, why that occurs. But it is frustrating for law enforcement and the Department of State Lands, because if they do take action on somebody who's been on the state portion for too long, and they say, hey, you can't be here anymore, you need to get off of state land. If they then hop over onto Ross Island private property, they kind of know that they can get away with that, because now Ross Island may be able to go out and tell them, no, you got to get off. Well, then, has their time started over? And so there's just some legal, questions that aren't something I have expertise in, because I don't, I'm not involved in all of those conversations about, land and trespassing and everything. Another part of that situation at Ross Island is that when I have been out there, I have perceived that most of those boats are occupied by people to some extent, whether they're occupied by a human being at all times, or they're occupied as a storage area for a person who, is part of an unauthorized encampment elsewhere. Marine Board staff are not going to to intervene in, you know, a housing and shelter crisis in Portland. We're focusing on the boats and how it impacts boaters. And so to tell the truth, if a boat is not out in the water causing any kind of a hazard, it's not actively, you know, causing oil sheen on the water, then we're probably going to be focusing our efforts elsewhere on higher priority vessels and focusing on, you know, trying to solve the problems that we can solve, and we can't solve a lot of these social issues that are intertwined with the boats in that area.
Well, I'm trying to understand the Marine Board's liability in allowing these boats to remain. You know, if one boat caught on fire, then they'd probably all go up. Probably at risk of personal safety. And I'm just trying to ascertain if the Marine Board has a liability in that regard.
Laura? You have to unmute yourself. You're muted.
Sorry about that. There actually was a fire in that Ross Island area in September that took out, I believe, 3 or 4 of the boats. And it was one of those situations where you have some very flammable materials, and it basically just jumped to all 3 or 4 boats very, very quickly.
So does that come back on us, Dorothy, as far as responsibility?
You know, I should probably defer to people with any amount of legal expertise, because I don't have that. But what I can say, just based on the statutes that give us authority to seize abandoned boats, those statutes do not describe a responsibility. And so that's all I can really say about that. But, you know, it's a good question, and one that, you know, a lot of people have asked about their own agencies, because we're not the only ones that respond to derelict and abandoned boats. You know, they end up on other properties as well. And so I think a lot of people have that question about, you know, who is responsible versus who has the ability to act or the authority to act if they, you know, feel able to. So that doesn't answer your question, because I'm not competent enough to answer that question at this point in time.
Laura, did you have an additional comment or question there?
Get your hand down, Laura.
You've got your hand still up. There you go.
Then I understand another complication my side of the is trying to sell their property. And the question is, well, do they transfer all the responsibility for those boats?
Yeah, and that's not a question that I'm, you know, informed about. I don't know much about, you know, what's going on with the sale there or not. I know that there are a lot of conversations going on amongst a lot of people about how we could try to address that problem, but at this point in time, I don't know what the solution could be.
Thanks, Dorothy.
So this is our unfortunate bystander, and maybe one or, I don't know, alarming or, you know, frustrating situations that happen. This is similar to the Marina situation, except this is just a private homeowner with a dock, and a boat drifts onto their dock. So, you know, to be a good citizen, they tie it up, they call the sheriff's office, and their expectation is, hey, it's weird. I'm sorry, we just made a drastic jump back in time. And I apologize, I don't know what's happening right now because the presentation has left, so I'm going to try to share it again. I think we're almost there. Can you all see the presentation again?
Yes, I can even see it now.
Yeah,
Okay.
I see it.
Great, well, we'll just keep clicking through here to try to get to where we left off.
Yeah, because before it was just white page spinning.
Huh, okay. So this is, like I said, a private homeowner. I'm sure their expectation is, well, I've done a good thing. I've grabbed this boat for someone. I'm gonna call the sheriff's office or my local police department or whoever, and they're going to take care of this. They'll get it back to the owner, and I won't have to think about this boat, for more than a day. So in this case, the Marine Board doesn't remove vessels that are moored to private docks. But we do provide technical assistance to the dock owner to try to connect them with the titled owner of that boat or try to obtain authority to sell or dispose of the boat. Like it describes in the call, what we run into with a lot of these boats that we hear about is that, we try to locate, or the sheriff's office tries to locate the owner of the boat, and the title owner says, well, gee, I sold that boat 10 years ago. I barely remember that boat. I haven't thought about it in years. But sorry, I don't remember who I sold it to, and oops, I didn't know that I was supposed to report it to the Marine Board, but it's absolutely not mine anymore. I sold it to a guy in a red pickup truck, and that's kind of the extent of the details that they have. And so that sort of becomes a dead end, and so that private property owner or private dock owner does kind of get stuck with that boat, and they have to figure out how to get rid of that boat on their own. Because with the very small amount of funding that we have and the number of significant high risk vessels that we encounter that could be causing navigational issues, pollution issues, safety issues, they're adrift in the channel, they're large, et cetera, we currently do not prioritize one that is, safely tied up to a dock presenting no hazards. So that's kind of the basis for that. So of course we have the angler, especially, in some of our, high profile waterways where there's a lot of, these live aboard boats that may be, not disposing of their waste properly, might be, scattering debris in the river. A lot of these folks are obviously very upset about that. They see these boats anchored on and on and on. And then, eventually one of those boats sinks and causes a problem. And so, like I kind of described, our response to that is, this issue of on-water camping and whether it's authorized or not authorized is complex. There are sometimes some boating violations, but more often the bigger violations or bigger problems involve the trespassing and the symptoms and consequences of homelessness and camping. And so in these cases, we defer to law enforcement in that area to try to work to connect these folks with services and, other avenues. And we share the information with the Department of State Lands as the land manager. But like I said, we don't get involved in trying to, evict a person from the water. This one comes up a lot, and have an established process for this, and I don't know if we should. So this is one where I would, obviously, I always welcome feedback, but I'm especially curious about this one. It's somebody who, they go and launch their boat, and they've noticed this abandoned boat on the bank, every time they launch, and, they'd really love to take that boat home and fix it up. It's such a shame. It's just out here wasting away, and they kind of want to rescue it. We don't have a process for that because that boat is located on public land or public water, and we don't share contact information for the titled owner of that. And so there's no process for that person to then try to get in touch with that owner and take possession of it. And in many cases, it wouldn't be advisable because they see the boat on the bank and they think it's better than it is. And we definitely don't want to encourage a situation where people are rescuing an abandoned boat and then letting it become abandoned again because it's in such poor quality.
Member Whitney?
Yeah, Dorothy, do we have any salvage program at all? Is there any attempts to try to recover what is usable from these boats?
Member Withy, no, there's no such program in place. The contract that we signed with a company to do the salvage and disposal and everything, there is a little piece of that contract that lets them know if they do want to salvage parts from a boat and sell them, they're authorized to do that, and then that would be required to then reduce the amount that we pay to them. So that's kind of, I think, an attempt at not sending absolutely every bit of it to the landfill. To my knowledge, we haven't had any contractors choose that option. There typically isn't anything of value on these boats, and they are much, much more expensive to dispose of than they were probably worth in the last decade. Many of them began as very, very nice boats. These aren't, inherently low quality boats. These are boats that, when they were brand new, they may have been, tens of thousands of dollars or more, but they've deteriorated to a point where now to take it to the dump is, much more than, what the value of the boat is.
Yeah, but there might be occasions where they have new equipment on the boat, or lo and behold, they have a pot of gold sitting in the back. There's no means of recovering that, and we just allow whoever's doing the salvage operation to be rewarded with what he finds.
Member Withy, I haven't thought about it that way, because it hasn't come up yet, but it's certainly worth, kind of prophesying and predicting how we might handle that if it were to happen. I just have not seen an abandoned and derelict boat that wasn't already stripped of everything usable and in very poor condition so far.
Thanks, Dorothy.
So this is a frustration of our, friends at the Coast Guard and, fire and rescue and our law enforcement partners, is that somebody calls in a sunken boat. It in many times launches what they consider to be a false search and rescue mission, because they don't know if somebody was on that boat recently and if this is an emergency situation or simply an unmanned boat that has now gone down in the water. And so it's helpful sometimes, if they were to call me and say, hey, I can say, yes, I do know about that boat. I can give them the details. But it still doesn't rule out the possibility that the actual sinking event may have caused a health safety hazard to somebody. So it still kind of has to be investigated. So that's pretty frustrating for some of those responders. So then we have, this happens every single time, almost. I shouldn't say it's every single time, but it's very, very common when an enforcement agency seizes a boat, is they send the pre-seizure notice to the last known owner of record, to let them know we're gonna seize your boat and you can be financially liable. And they say, oh my gosh, I sold that boat X number of years ago. And they oftentimes are able to come up with some evidence, past emails from a Craigslist buyer, a Facebook, look, I sold my boat today from 5 years ago. But it's very frustrating that we aren't having more people reporting the sale of their boat so that we can see that chain of ownership. Because after this person sold their boat, we might be able to figure out that this boat changed hands 2 or 3 more times without any of those buyers applying for title, and then obviously, not reporting a sale of a boat they never applied for the title for. And so right now, our records just indicate that title owner is still the owner. And so, that's something that I would love to see improve.
I see an opportunity there to provide some kind of education to voters when they actually get their original title. Something bold and simple that says when you sell.
Yeah, Chair Early, I believe that it's on there, but you can always make it more and more obvious. And so I think we would like to look at ways of how are we going to get this message out to folks, because most people, they sell the boat, they sign the title and they hand it over and they're just thrilled. And they don't think about that little, piece of follow-up as far as reporting it to us, because they believe that person they just handed the title to is going to go transfer the title. And in many, many cases, it seems not to happen.
It also deprives the agency of registration funds also.
Mm-hmm.
Colleen, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I agree with you. I think more education is needed, but I also think we need some education down the line, not just with folks that own the boat. I know an issue I've heard a lot about in the Portland area is older family member, parents, let's say they age, perhaps they pass away, and their heirs are left with this boat. They may not know anything about boating. They may not even be aware that this boat's been in the family for decades, needs to be sold or properly disposed of or what have you. So we just need education all up and down the line.
Absolutely. So our next caller profile is the spring cleaner, who's often helping clean up a property of a friend or a family member, maybe somebody who's passed away. Somebody who's going into a care home is something I've heard a lot. They're trying to kind of get rid of, stuff back at the old place. Maybe this person has physical disabilities. Frequently they have limited funding. Maybe they aren't a boat person. They're not a person who has a pickup truck and a trailer. And so they call the Marine Board just for any type of assistance that we may have as far as trying to properly dispose of this vessel. And so what we do is we provide them as much information and just technical help as we possibly can, but we don't have any financial or physical resources to offer folks in this case. I may call around to disposal facilities and, just help them navigate that process and make it as easy as I can with the, resources that I have, but we really don't have resources at this point for this situation. And then this kind of goes back to the false search and rescue thing too, but we get some of these well check calls, and a lot of the time they come directly to me. It would be much more appropriate for them to go to law enforcement, but I understand, various reasons why people may find it easier to contact the Marine Board versus, their local law enforcement. So I try to help make those connections. And so a lot of times I'm directly sharing the information with my contacts that I have at this law enforcement agency. But I'm also trying to encourage those folks to feel empowered to contact, the more appropriate agency themselves. And sometimes that's just sort of, providing them permission to call the Coast Guard. They don't realize that they have that, ability as a citizen. And so, as I'm sure we don't satisfy everybody every time. We can't address every abandoned and derelict vessel, and we can't necessarily solve every person's problem. We can obviously provide them with excellent customer service, try to connect them with as many resources as we know how to. There are folks that call and they have a concern about an abandoned and derelict vessel, and whether it doesn't rise to our priority level or it's, within the jurisdiction of some other agency that's dealing with it and we're, kind of on the sidelines, there are folks that end up, they're not happy about the ADV situation in their state waterways. And so then, of course, we have the wary waterway user, and this represents the boater whose experience is diminished by this problem. Whether it's that this problem is absolutely directly impacting their activity, or it's the perception of risk, which is, every bit as significant as actual risk. It affects the experience of other waterway users. And so, especially with these ones, again, where it's people on the boats, it's the activities of the people that are actually more concerning to the caller than the fact that it's a boat. There could be no boat there at all. It could just be all docks and structures and, people and criminal activity and such. And so that's what these folks are upset about. And again, we don't directly, intervene or, have the ability to in a lot of these types of situations. And so we refer them to proper law enforcement and the land manager, which is usually DSL. So I don't believe I have any specific program updates. I put that in there as a placeholder in case something, of note came up between when I submitted this and now. So this will just be me being available for more questions or concerns or feedback.
Craig?
Yeah, I think it was a very good presentation and appreciate it, Dorothy. I think one of my greatest concerns is the potential for pollution spillage off these boats, hazardous materials, what have you, and making sure that, we properly address that and don't take on all the responsibility ourselves. In my prior life in Alaska, that was a major issue. And we were oftentimes in the Federal Aviation Administration with problems that occurred years ago, and we had a responsibility to clean up after others. So that's a great concern of mine, making sure that we get it over to the proper agents, have to fund the cleanup or whatever's involved in that. So that's a good concern I have, and it sounds like you're doing a very good job of coordinating with those other agencies. But I think we need to be on a watch for that. I don't know what's in these boats. We do know they all have batteries in them. We know they all have petroleum products in them. What else they may have, we probably don't have much knowledge of. But I think we need to take care of making sure that the responsibility is given to the right organization in a timely manner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. I enjoyed going through the presentation prior to the meeting also, but there's plenty of room for additional help, I'm sure. And I think that education about boat sales and increasing that would be a big help.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dorothy at this for item for the abandoned derelict vessel program update? Okay, seeing as there is none, thank you again for the presentation, and we'll leave you in the hot seat right there because we'll go ahead and I think we'll go ahead and do item E before we take a break. So item E, the possible rulemaking via petition.
Okay. Sure. So Chair, early members of the board, back in August, we received a petition from the Kirk County Sheriff's Office with some support from the Prineville State Park or Prineville Reservoir State Park.
Hang on, Dorothy, can you not share now the screen?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Stop presenting. Okay. Jennifer Cooper gave me a tutorial this morning and still a bit new. Okay. So now you can see me and I can see all of you.
Yes.
Okay. So in August, we received a petition from the Kirk County Sheriff's Office, Marine Patrol, and with backup support from Prineville Reservoir State Park. And they are requesting that the board establish a slow no wake zone in Prineville Reservoir. The proposed rule language is included in your materials, along with a map that shows the exact location where the zone is proposed. And then in addition, I provided just a little bit of background information related to the site and previous rulemakings, and included a map that shows, that illustrates the current rules in that same area. So we solicited public comment on the petition from August 6th to September 20th. We received a total of 2 public comments, which are included in your materials. And as stated in the board book, in deference to our marine law enforcement partners who patrol these waters regularly and observe the conditions that are described in the petition, the staff recommendation is to accept the petition and open rulemaking.
Are there any questions or comments?
No, I think for me, I trust our law enforcement and their judgment on this one. And being there was only a couple, comment letters, it didn't seem to be too much objection so far. So I'd like to see what public comment has to say about it.
Yeah, Craig, you have your hand up?
Yeah, front-of reservoirs are large body of water, and we're only dealing with a small portion of it. So we're not taking away a large area for people to recreate. And so I'm for the rule as staff recommends, and I make a motion that the board adopt the rule, accept the petition amendment OAR 250-020-0073.
And just a point of order, we can't adopt the rule, but we can open rulemaking.
But that's what I meant to say. Thank you.
All right, Vince,
And I'd like to second that motion.
okay? And so are there any other questions or comments regarding the motion to open rulemaking? Okay, seeing as there is none, all those in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and so I think that right now, since it is almost 10 o'clock, we will take a very short break, and we will resume in about 5 minutes.
Very good.
Thank you. Okay, so we are back from our break now, and we are on item F, consideration for rulemaking OAR 250-020-0091 and Dorothy Deal.
Thank you. Chair Early, members of the board. The concept of an electric motor exemption on North and South Twin Lakes has been a topic of conversation over the course of several board meetings. It began with a citizen petition to allow the general use of electric motors and evolved into a concept specifically aiming to enhance the experience of voters with disabilities. At the most recent meeting in July, the board directed staff to draft rules for North and South Twin Lakes, which would allow voters with disabilities to operate with an electric motor slow down wake speed. In drafting the language that you see in your report, the proposed rules, I think our most important goal was to assure that we didn't inadvertently discriminate in some way or create challenges or extra steps for no reason. That's the intent of the program. So for instance, we left out any references to specific outside programs, knowing that we have no control over how those programs may change or what new programs may be implemented in the future. Right now, we know there's a Department of Fish and Wildlife program for hunters and anglers with disabilities, but there may be programs in the future or in the works now that we don't know about yet, and so we didn't want to preemptively exclude those. And we also understand that there are a variety of barriers that people can face to obtaining a state-issued driver's license, and so we did not include that as a prerequisite. Public comment was solicited from August 24th to October 4th. We received both written comments as well as some verbal comments left by voicemail. And the comments were in line with previous comments that the board has received on the initial citizen petition related to electric motors on Twin Lakes. We received a few comments in support, a lot of comments in opposition for the reasons stated previously and which are summarized in your materials. Given that the proposed rule language reflects the board's ongoing interest in enhancing access for voters with disabilities, the staff recommendation is to adopt those proposed rules as written.
Okay, discussion. Craig?
Well, I was surprised no one made some comments. First of all, I'd like to remember that the rule originated from a petition for several persons who were users of the lake and no longer were physically able to use it because of their disability. I'm a strong supporter of this rule and encourage my colleagues on board to support the rule. Oregon water bodies belong